I often talk about the science of creativity, and I have a master's of science in creativity because a lot of the work I do deals with business. And so businesses feel very comfortable when we talk about things like innovation, the science of creativity, it as a process. But the reality is that when you actually teach creativity, you get into personal transformation. It's just not what I lead with.
Okay. Yeah, because you talk about bringing ideas to life. And what I notice is that some ideas, you know, we all have hundreds and thousands of ideas every day, and not all of those ideas are good ideas. And what I notice is that some ideas seem to have a life of their own, as it were, and they require very little effort. And whereas other ideas, regardless of how much care and attention and resources we put into them, they result in nothing. So in terms of ideas, you know, it's your phrase, bringing ideas to life. How do you do that when we are just looking at it from a cognitive point of view?
That is a very good question. And I guess I would say that probably the phrase is a little bit misleading in the sense that I'm less interested in the production of ideas and much more interested in the production of questions. Because I think if you ask beautiful questions, ideas come naturally. Whereas I do think that the science of creativity is very much focused on how to actually bring ideas to life. I take it from my marketing materials. I'm sure I'm talking about that. But to answer it from an innovation perspective, it's true. You don't know which ideas are actually going to be the ones that you are going to actually fall in love with that last, and that fall in love with, and that just die. And that's about living with ideas, testing ideas, prototyping ideas, and also pivoting. So not being afraid to actually shift or change. And yeah, it's a little bit like a dance. You got to move with them to actually see which ones will come alive. I once had an innovation director who said something quite controversial. She said to the team, you have to be prepared to drown your puppies, which meant, and everyone's like, oh, we don't drown puppies. But what she meant is that sometimes you fall in love with an idea or a project, and you've got to learn to let it go, because love enough is not enough to actually warrant something if you want to bring it to innovation. Absolutely an intrinsic value in creativity. And I think that ideas, even if somebody else has thought of them, and it's the very first time that you thought of them, it changes your brain. And that is just as worthy as having an idea that some Einstein or whatever. So yeah, creativity at the end of the day is always kind of intrinsic. But in business, we do have to talk about business outputs, but its beauty and its value is what it does for you. Well, what led me to be interested in understanding more about creativity was I had an innovation career in a large corporate, and at this point I was been doing it for 7 years. And we often brought in agencies to help us to actually run ideation sessions or help us with innovation projects. And I had a sneaking suspicion that no one actually knew what they were doing, that they were all kind of guessing. And so when I found out that there was a degree in it and that I could get some certainty around it and some science around it, that's what got me interested, because creativity is essential to innovation. It is the catalyst to innovation. And yet we spend so much time talking about innovation process, and we really neglect its parent, which is creativity. So that's what led me to actually be interested in the first place. But as I went through the degree, that kind of changed me, because that's when I learned about how nuanced creativity was, and the beauty of actually being able to look at questions and not just a fixation on ideas.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I love the your focus on the question as opposed to the answers, because questions are generative. Questions are, you know, they are essentially creative, because there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. There's numerous answers, and based on the context, based on the time, the answer will be different.
Absolutely, and they can be sometimes infinite. So that they can actually get you intrinsically, they can get you in a beautiful flow state. As you know, the brain goes off and it hates an unanswered question and it loves patterns. So by asking a really beautiful question, the brain will start seeking, and sometimes you'll get what you call serendipity, which is suddenly, it's like the universe just gives you the right thing or the right person at the right time. And it's my belief is that the universe isn't working 24/7 to give you gifts, but you're suddenly more aware of it. And we very much have a culture that's focused on the answer, getting there quickly, the solution. And so it knee-jerks us to actually kind of go, well, we know what the problem is. And it's like, well, do we? Can we sit with that ambiguity? And it's uncomfortable. And that's another reason why we skip through it, is we kind of say, oh, well, we know what we need to focus on. And it's like, well, no, it pays to actually stay longer up front in the uncomfortableness of this, so that we can really understand what is it that we're trying to solve before we rush into ideation. Because we could produce beautiful innovations for things that we really didn't need.
Yeah, absolutely. Plastic being one of them.
Yes, good. Yes, exactly. Good example. When you're working with groups, you have to actually go to their energy inside, and it's a way of facilitating and bringing it out. And even when you're asking a really beautiful question, in order for people to actually understand that question, they have to actually go into that world. They have to step into that, visualize what that might be like. And when we're working in these sessions, we're working on very dreamy, optimistic places where we think the future could be. And if you have to go into that world, that shifts you, because suddenly it's not just kind of imagining it, it's really kind of vividly imagining it. And the further the question kind of steps you away from the closer in, the harder you have to work to actually place yourself in that world. And that's when you start to see the beginnings of people starting to actually get emotionally or energetically invested in a project. And if you have that right at the beginning, then it's easier to nurture and carry through. And as people actually start to step through the process, you help them to connect more and more to possibilities. And that's a really exciting place for people to be, is to step into worlds of possibilities. And in business, we don't often talk about that. We talk about answers or processes or results. And to actually take that off and for people to be able to live with possibilities for a while gets them into the more intrinsic motivation, and also gets them more energetically involved. To be fair, I'm not 100% sure I agree. I take your point that we spend a lot of time thinking about the ideas and not necessarily the longer term of impacts, like we're talking about plastic, of actually commercializing them. However, when I'm working with teams, we actually do spend quite a bit of time talking about the impact, because we're working with the reality of organizations. Organizations are set up to do business as usual, and even though they understand that their future will be impacted if they don't be more innovative, nonetheless, we're very much rewarded on next month, next quarter, next year, and our bonuses. So it makes innovation hard to actually live. So a lot of the challenges that I face is that people love their innovations, but are not convinced that the organization will actually follow through and back them to the end, that they can actually become a reality.
Yes, and I suppose what I was talking about was like not just the impact on the organization, or in terms of their profitability, in terms of their values and their goals at the organizational level, but perhaps impact on in a wider context, on the societal level. Because I'm very much influenced by creativity from a sociological point of view, the systems thinking point of view, where we think about the integration between the individual, society and culture. So there's an impact of creativity ultimately in transforming culture. For example, plastic is an excellent example. It transformed our culture worldwide. You know, can't think of a country where plastic is not used. Plastic isn't part of people's everyday existence.
Agreed. I think as a whole, we are not very good system thinkers. And I know that more and more people are calling for it, because it's very complicated, the world that we've developed. And a lot of it has been developed from silo type thinking. And creativity is absolutely at the heart of how that kind of thinking will be undone and actually recreated in a more healthy and productive way. I hear a lot of people talking about it, but I've yet to see organizations truly embrace it, because it's complicated and it's unwieldy, and we don't yet know elegant ways of bringing it to life. Well, my vision for the future is that corporations would actually change, because for me, to a large degree, and this is why I do work with them, is they rule the world. They control our pensions, they control they control so many employees' lives, they can influence governments, and sometimes they're as powerful as governments or lobbyists. And if we can actually start to change them from the inside out and have them think differently about opportunities, instead of just thinking about competition, thinking about the fact that we could actually grow the pie for everyone, truly caring about their employees and actually making sure that their employees could bring them best selves to work, and that is their creative self. And we're actually thinking more not about next year, next quarter, but thinking about the larger impact that they have on the world. So for me, working with corporations is essential, because if you can change them to a large degree, you can break down some of the things that are wrong with this world, and you can also release the people inside them, because not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. So a lot of people will have corporate careers, and I want them to be wonderful corporate careers where they can actually creatively express themselves rather than being something toxic or something that actually is just deadening to the soul.
Right. So when you come across people who are toxic in an organization, is it just because they're not in the right place at the right time, so their energies, they're not able to express their energy in a functional way?
No, I actually believe organizations encourage a little bit of toxicity. I think it's a way that they reward people. We have this wonderful thing called money at the end of it, which everyone needs to succeed. And it's kind of then set up as a competition about who can get the most money. And so it encourages bad behavior because at the end of the day, those people who oftentimes are toxic but actually deliver results usually are not dealt with in a corporate. We value results more than we value the way that we achieve results. So those are some of the things that foster some of the toxic behavior, unfortunately, and those people who are ambitious see it as a way to get ahead.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Yes, you know, I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective, but you're absolutely right that, you know, the banking industry is an excellent example of this, isn't it? Where
Yes, indeed.
people are rewarded for very bad behavior.
Yes, and I mean, we're having a royal commission on it at the moment, and it's extraordinary the amount of bad behavior. And people also lose touch with the fact that they're actually hurting people because they're so far removed from the impact that all they can see is the cars, the lifestyle, the getting ahead, and what it's done to pensioners, what it's done to poor people. They don't feel that impact, so they don't actually judge their actions to be bad.
Right. Yes, because they're thinking from a very narrow perspective, like the personal needs and the needs of their family, as opposed to the wider needs of the world.
Absolutely, and they're thinking of status, and the world that they're in rewards that type of thinking, so it's hard for them to actually question it.
Yeah.
That creativity is intrinsic to everyone on the planet, but that doesn't mean necessarily that everyone is going to be great at ideas. It's so much more than that. It's learning how to ask beautiful questions. It's about being curious about the world. It's about helping other people to actually bring their ideas to life. And it's also about implementing ideas. So it's not just about the creation, but it's the whole gamut of the creative problem solving process. And all of us have access to that. And all of us actually need to be feeding our souls